Welcome back, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us again this morning. My name is Adam Stein. I'll let everybody introduce themselves when I pass the first question around, but I wanted to start off with a couple of just observations before I hand it off the podium, as it will, to the panelists. The session we put together today really talks about what's happening with mobile, but in security, but I think it's more than that because, and I'll say something controversial to start off the panel, I think security has failed. I think it's failed for a number of years to do what it intended to do, which was to keep the bad traffic and malicious traffic out. And it hasn't failed completely because it's making improvements, but there's so many more in the security industry, these are referred to as attack vectors. There's so many more vectors, and mobile really represents a huge multiplication of the attack vector possibility for the enterprise. So with that in mind, what can be done? Obviously, everybody's making progress. These guys up here are going to talk about what kind of progress can be made on all layers, right? Not just the technology layers, but I like to, and I've tweeted this earlier this week, when you look at the proverbial OSI stack from a network point of view, it's going up the stack beyond, what people talk about layer 7 and layer 8 and 9, which is the user and corporate layer, the business layer of network operations. And yes, it's not an official OSI term, but forget about that. That doesn't matter. What matters is there's a reality that in networking and mobile and security, you have to think beyond just the technology and there's a user perspective. So security is dynamic. It's not static. And a couple of people up here, run dynamic services. They're going to talk about why that's important and why signatures, while interesting, don't solve the security problem. You can't, it's an arms race. You'll never keep ahead of it. There needs to be a dynamic way to do that, kind of like a machine learning way of applying machine learning to security, and that on a product and corporate basis. The mobile domain is different than network domain in the past and computing domains in the past. Yes, technology is different, but how do we educate the users that are working in our companies and for our partners to make sure they're doing the right thing from a security mobility standpoint? And lastly, as Jack Gold pointed out earlier this week, the cost of security is escalating in dollars, in time, and opportunity, right? Opportunity cost, opportunity lost. I give you a good example. In the States, many of you have traveled, I'm sure, in Europe, they've been using the chip and PIN card for years, right? In the States, most of us have chip and PIN cards, and in the Bay Area alone, like 90% of the chip and PIN readers, when you go to buy something, don't stick the card in there, the PIN, it's not working yet. What is that? Even Target sometimes. I'm like, have you guys learned nothing from what's happened in the past? So part of it's learning from what's happened, and part of it is applying things. So I guess I'll ask the first question here, and again, please do introduce yourself. On the financial side is, how does the industry stem the flow and cost of malicious breaches, right? Ponyman said that there's been 15 million breaches across 58 benchmark organizations last year for a total of $12.7 billion, and $2.7 million increase in value. So why is this happening, Sheldon? Tell the audience why you think this is happening and what we should be thinking about.
Yeah, so Sheldon Herbert, Checkpoint Software. I think it's interesting. You quote a couple numbers in there from a financial perspective of known breaches and the cost of those breaches. I think the scary part is actually the unknown breaches, right? There's a lot of things happening out there with the zero-day attacks that probably get into the billions of dollars that it's costing certain companies when their credentials are given away or taken away by hackers. So I think it's interesting that the awareness isn't necessarily there yet. So 12.7 million, a lot of people would shrug that off and say, well, it's not that big of a number. Yeah. But the awareness isn't there as how big it is as an industry as a whole. So I think really it's about driving awareness that these things are happening. You don't know what you don't know in a lot of cases. So a lot of people don't even know that they've had a breach or don't even know that they've lost potential revenue as a result of it.
Interesting. Ozzy?
Okay. Ozzy Cohen, Better Mobile Security. I totally agree. I think that the Ponyman, data is not accurate simply because they measure what they can measure. But you have billion devices out there, some of them used for business, and the activity is total off the network, right? If I'm a marketing guy loading to SurveyMonkey the list of my clients sitting at Starbucks, and there's a man-in-the-middle attack, and all the information goes to China, but also to the SurveyMonkey server, which is also on the cloud, the corporate doesn't know about it at all, right? It's totally off the radar.
Until it's too late.
Yeah, so I think that there are many more attacks today that were not covered by that. On the other hand, I also agree that the overall cost of a breach like that is still not 2.7 million, right? We don't allow to 99% of the application to do stuff that can create that kind of a damage. But still the question is, okay, so it's lower and more, but what should be done? I think that once we'll start to see the first breaches, it's going to be like the RSA, breach 2 years ago or 3 years ago, right? That's how big it's going to be when it hit, because the awareness is not there. In mobile devices, if you think about it, it took Windows to reach where it is today 30 years as a major platform for business. It took iPads 5 years.
Right.
And they rushed through all that, leaving a lot of bad bodies behind.
Yeah, but it's basically the equivalent of Moore's Law. I mean, if
No,
you guys are
I
familiar
agree.
with the chip industry, the doubling transistors and circuits, it's basically Moore's Law revisited in another domain.
Exactly. So I think it's the awareness is the first thing, and I think that we here contribute to that. People should know. At the end, you said that security failed. So who is to be blamed? Is that the vendors? Is that the consumers that didn't find the right way to justify the cost?
Is it the enterprise user who says,
no,
I don't want to go through that server, it's screwing up my experience?
I don't want to blame anyone. I'm just saying security was always about the cost, the risk, and the convenience. Yeah. And I think that people went to the extreme on the convenience side when it comes to mobile devices. Took higher risk because some of the stuff was not there. I think that right now, all those tiny pieces that are needed to create secure environment. Look how many vendors you have here, and there are more, right? So you multiple choices. Clients have to do their own calculation now and pick up the right stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, Bharath. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, folks. My name is Bharath Rangarajan, VP of Product at Lookout. Claim to fame, some of you might have seen the 60-minute special on Lookout where we talked about a lot of these topical things a few weeks back where our co-founder presented it. Anyway, if you haven't checked it out, this is my marketing spiel. Go check it out. Anyways, this is...
I give him the hook. He's got a marketing spiel.
Exactly. So in terms of this, to put things in perspective, and the Ponymon numbers are great, and another statistics from the same company or the same research pointed out that 66% of data breaches in some companies started on a mobile device. So it's not just about attacking the device. It's becoming an entry point to other things in the enterprise, right? And to give, and both my esteemed colleagues here talked about the scale. In mobile security, I think the saying, right, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence is absolutely true, because just because we're not seeing it doesn't mean that it's not happening. And to give you guys some perspective on that scale, on a day-to-day basis, we look at about 100,000 apps. And it's not, like you said, there is no way, like Adam started out, there's no way you can manually analyze these applications. You need automation, you need predictive analytics, you need machine data, all the buzzwords you put there. Unfortunately, those buzzwords actually have to act. And based on that, we have auto-commit about 10,000 applications. So on a day-to-day basis, we're looking at 100,000 apps and classifying about 10,000 apps as known bad. That's the scary part that nobody's aware of, and we're protecting it, right? So from the first transition we see that needs to happen is going from forensics to predictive security, right? To put it in Hollywood terms, we need to go from CSI to Minority Report. So that's the transition I want to see happening in the industry.
Cool, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Ranjeet Vidwans. I'm the CMO of Blue Cedar Networks. And in the interest of winning $5 from Adam, some of you may know us. We spun out of a company called Mocana. We had a platform called Atlas. And about 2 months ago, Atlas shrugged, Adam, and we spun out into this new entity called Blue Cedar Networks. So Adam, I think there was an interesting kind of angle in the question you raised, which is how do organizations manage and mitigate the cost of a breach? And certainly there's a big element of the unknown, so to speak. Yeah. But I was kind of looking at it in terms of the back to the front. So something bad has happened. Most of your organizations probably have tools and best practices in place for incident response management, all that kind of stuff. But by that time, money's already being spent. The damage has already been done, and you're just trying to mitigate it. So go up one step in the food chain and try to do better detection, better proactive detection of what's going on. And some of the folks up here and many others are doing some really cool stuff in helping you get ahead of the game and catching stuff kind of as it's happening and before it can actually do really, really bad damage to your org. And then the best way from a cost-effective standpoint is prevention, of course. Do everything you can to prevent the badness from happening in the first place. And the ideal way to do that is really, any Doctor Who fans in the audience? Show of hands, handful. So you may know that the Doctor's ship is called the TARDIS, where it's this huge ship, but from the outside it gets shrunken down to this, this police call box.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
So I think the best step towards prevention is taking the stuff that you want to expose on mobile, because it's absolutely true that mobile is becoming probably the preeminent threat vector. And so there's data that you're trying to protect, functionality, transactionality, but instead of kind of trying to nail it down at the device level, shrink it down to the app. Make the threat surface that you need to control, mitigate, monitor, and manage down to something that you can really, really control much more effectively.
So if you're a doctor, vaccination.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, vaccination is the way to go, for those who believe in vaccination. If you don't, that's okay. Okay, next question, Ranjeet. I'll start with you down at that end. You talked about, changing the game of how the technology works and changing the education. How do you change user education, and how do enterprises do that? How do they limit some of the user behavior and change user behavior and reward good behavior? If any of your parents, rewarding good behavior is far easier than punishing bad behavior to getting positive results. Yeah. My one parental advice for the day. And not that I have a lot of it, my wife would tell you. But yeah, I mean, basically, how do you change that behavior? And second part of the question is, are there specific customer examples that you've worked on that even if you can't name the customer, name the industry is fine, where you've helped change the behavior? Again, thinking of my OSI stack thing, how do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So awareness, or lack thereof, has been just a massive ongoing problem in all manners of InfoSec, and it's just been compounded further by mobile. So some interesting thing, and by the way, it's not just InfoSec, right? We all, I'm sure, have gone through sexual harassment training and things like that on a periodic basis. So the interesting things that we've seen some forward-looking CISOs do is gamify the awareness training. So there's two aspects to it. There's the rate at which attacks are coming and evolving. So the content that you need to educate your users with has to evolve rapidly, and that's a challenge that that's ongoing. But then getting that stuff out in front of your end users and getting them engaged and actually consuming and digesting that information is a challenge. So gamification is one interesting tool that, so I'm based in New York, work with some forward-looking capital market CISOs, and so they're rolling stuff out where people can win points, and there's a leaderboard and all that kind of stuff. So it's not perfect, but that's a step that they're taking. And I kind of go back to awareness will do a lot, but especially in mobile, like there's so much new stuff coming that you got to circle back to prevention. You got to kind of, in addition to awareness, just think about the fact that if the device is compromised, if the network that the app is coming from is compromised, it's a guy sitting in Starbucks, and instead of connecting to Starbucks, he connected to Starbucks. So the device is compromised, the network is compromised. Can you put a solution in place that will still make sure that the transaction you're charged with securing is still end-to-end protected, even in that compromised environment, in addition to the awareness?
Thank you.
Sure. I think before we even get to user education, another critical part is the trust between IT and the user, right? Security, I think through some unfortunate missteps, there's a bit of mistrust that's happened, right? And especially in the mobile world, we are extremely sensitive to user experience, user privacy, and things like battery life and other areas, right? So the first step in a proper education is being transparent. So transparency of IT to essentially indicate, hey, here is a set of new tools that I'm deploying, and this is the extent of user privacy violation or lack thereof that's going to exist. So that transparency certainly helps build that trust because unless there is that collaboration, no technology is going to get adopted. We track this on a month-to-month basis. Hey, how many users are actually activating these services, right? And we find that there is that tussle, and you want to solve that. And so we believe that before even educating users about the potential risks, there has to be that trust and collaboration built between, so that the mindset has to go from Big Brother is watching me to Big Brother's got my back. So that's the mindset transition we want IT to, or rather help adopt from an end user perspective. And to make that happen, the other big transition we are seeing in our customer base is moving from a stick approach to a carrot-based approach, right? In the desktop or PC world, what would happen is if I didn't keep my software up to date, I would lose access to email. So it's like there's always this corrective action. On the other hand, what we are seeing is more of progressive measures wherein we found that it's not yet gamification, but also better incentives, right? Hey, if you keep your software up to date, you're eligible for faster upgrades. Or in certain companies where your email mailbox is restricted just to 500 megs, hey, for actually good behavior, you're rewarded by a larger mailbox. So these kinds of carrot-based approaches, I think, will also help in building a stronger security culture.
Yeah, I think IT has been known as the Department of No
Yeah.
for way too long. And mobile is like, well, you can tell me no, but I'm going to do what's called BYOX.
Exactly.
Right? It isn't just BYOD, as everybody knows. It's bring your own app, bring your own cloud, bring your own device. You know, it's X. Yeah. There's a lot of things that people do beyond device, and you want to reward good behavior because you want people to work within the lines, if you will, but not make the lines so small that it's like, oh, you gave me a 2x2 box. Yeah. No, I'm not going to do that. Ozzy?
I a little bit disagree with some of the things because
Please.
Our approach is that the first thing that you have to do is to understand the reason. Why is that an issue here, right? And there are two major fundamental reasons why we face all those situations. And that's because how the end user, which are the weakest link, that all of us agree, right, have a very unique behavior when it comes to mobile devices. Firstly, they treat it as their own device. Even if that's a mobile point of sale of Walmart or Macy's, they will still, and we have seen it. We've seen a retailer using mobile point of sale, and the associates try to hook to the Wi-Fi network of another vendor because it was faster. You know, that's good attention, right? But you know, this immediately they crash the entire security thing.
Make sure it's not a lookout rogue access point.
The other
They
point,
have those everywhere, by the way.
So even if it's not theirs, they still treat it as if it's their own, right?
Right.
And the other thing is that you know when and the other thing is that they still use it as a phone. And I'll give you an example. If you'll be sitting at the airport and a kid, 16 years old, crying, will come to you and say, hey, my flight is late. I need to call my grandmother, which is in Boston. Can I lend your phone for a second to call her? You'll handle that to her. But if he'll come and say the same thing, hey, give me your laptop. I would like to send her an email. You send him away. Well, guess what? I know enough 16 years old kid that can in 5 minutes crack your device, pull everything out there. Yeah. So people think of that as a phone and not as a business machine. And they have to understand that those phones today are more powerful than anything else. Yeah. So the way we have seen clients approaching that is obviously by gamification. These strategies have also been used in the past for Windows, etc. Yeah. You know, sending a phishing email by corporate, see who is responding, and call him, hey, don't do that, right?
Or chat. I mean, Lookout gave a demo yesterday, and lo and behold, I got a chat message last night somewhere along those lines, and I laughed. Like, I don't think so.
The other thing is starting to be more proactive on the warning side. At least for our solution, we provide real-time threat detection and prevention solution.
Dynamic, like we talked about
now,
in the beginning.
You can block, okay? You can stop stuff. But what we have seen in a very large financial institute, what they did is they turned on the warning feature only, warning only. So the first 6 months, people just got warnings. Yeah. They were not blocked. Obviously, there's some risk, but administrators, security administrators from the back end looked at the console, got alerts, and if something was risky, they would call someone and say, look, you are here, you are there, you are doing that kind of stuff, right? And the third thing is, you know, you have to train the people to understand how risky some of those applications are. So we have this service called Analyzer that basically identifies the risk of third-party application. It runs on demand. It can be done automatically. And we allow user, when we see client allowing their user actually to send a request. Please analyze SurveyMonkey, keeping the same example. Let me know. And they get a report showing them, look, you know, SurveyMonkey is great, but it charges your credentials as well as location, right? Be aware of that, right? So now they start to understand, and this client that I've seen doing that keep on mentioning all the time that all those things that happen, that those applications are doing, are not only done for corporate side of the device, right? Also for your private side. So be aware of that. Be, you know, putting in their face a report, very simple, that shows them how risky the application that they pick and choose, whatever they wish, is another way.
Yeah. And I mean, Sheldon, before I pass it to you, you've got the unique perspective, I think, of people here on the panel, and perhaps in the audience, of you've worked, Checkpoint has, his company has, in different computing domains for a long time, and have morphed into different domains and now mobile. What's different and what can be done to train people, and what can you learn from what you've done in past computing domains and now apply in mobile?
It's interesting because it's good to have these smart guys go first because I can steal some of their answers when I
did that on purpose.
Perfect.
I gave love to him because he's from London, Ontario. Joe Thornton of our San Jose Sharks is from Ontario as well, London, Ontario. Exactly. They won last night, by the way, 3-2. But there you go. I digress. Keep going.
I think it's interesting. You can train. If you have 500 people in your organization, you can train all 500 of them. You can give them all the tools that they need. One person's going to go into Starbucks and they're going to click through and you're exposed, right? So I think really the ownership of putting in the proper policy and being really thoughtful as you deploy mobility within your organizations, that's really where it starts. I always use the example when you hand out a laptop within your organization, your IT shops. When you hand out a laptop, have you ever handed one out without antivirus, a VPN, and a firewall on it? No, you wouldn't. And why would you not do that? Why would you do that with a mobile device, right? Yeah. So I think it really comes from the IT side of things. The awareness has to get to them. We keep using awareness and prevention, but the awareness has to get to them, and then they have to come up with a thoughtful plan into how they need to deploy to the technology. Right now, there's a lot of reactive things happening within these organizations. They say, oh no, we had a breach or we had a problem, let's throw MDM at it. And MDM's great for certain things, locking down the specific device, but it doesn't necessarily prevent those threats from happening. No. We've got information that we're trying to protect, so let's throw a container on the device. Great, again, I came from good technology, it's a fantastic technology, but it doesn't necessarily stop the hackers from getting into the network. So I think the holistic training that needs to happen isn't necessarily at the end user level, it's in the IT departments and letting everyone know where the vulnerabilities are, where the weakest portions of the business are when it comes to mobility, and then working with the organization to have a thoughtful plan in how they deploy mobility. That's the way we approach it, and I think if organizations take a little longer in order to get to that level where they start deploying applications and devices, and you'll see a lot less breaches and a lot less vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I'll put you on the spot just a little bit and say, are there specific companies or industry where you had a customer example where you can talk to how this has happened within the Checkpoint ecosystem?
Yeah, I can. I won't mention specific names, but I can think of a healthcare organization in particular where they were struggling with BYOD. They're struggling with, okay, do we just keep buying corporate liable devices and lock it down so that the users really can't access anything, and that's our way of preventing things from happening? But they stepped back. They took 3 months basically and went into a planning process and figured out, okay, so we're not going to be able to buy one solution that's going to fit all of our different user groups within a hospital. Doctors are going to do what they do. Nurses are going to do what they do. Our executive staff is going to do whatever they need to do. So what they did was they took an approach where one size doesn't fit all. So they have one of our products on the physicians' handhelds in particular, so that they know that at least the integrity of that device is in a good state. Then they have a container solution for their executive staff so that they can go, they can have that conversations back and forth with an email, and there's no HIPAA violations, no data leakage, no issues from that perspective. And then they have MDM blanketed over all of it. So I think, with this particular healthcare system, they sat there, they took a step back from it. They said, we're not just going to throw out a bunch of iPads, throw out a bunch of devices. Let's go into a planning cycle. Let's figure out what's out there. And when we do deploy it, we're going to deploy it right. It's not going to be reactive. It's going to be very proactive. And we're going to see if we can solve all the issues that we would have up front.
Yeah, I mean, that is a perfect intro to my last question that I'll spend time. And I'll leave a couple of minutes for questions. Anybody have questions yet that want to get to? Yeah? Got a mic up over there somewhere? Spencer, sorry to put you on the spot, buddy. Brian, you don't get to answer a question. No, you don't get that. Spencer, avoid him. Go this way. This way. No, 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 no.
There was someone there.
Sorry, Adam.
Go ahead, Brian.
I'll start with you, Sheldon, because you've all kind of commented on it, but you talk about the fact that you wouldn't release a laptop without antivirus, firewall, proxy server on it, and you're sitting with essentially 4 people here who did mobile at various enterprises, and every single time we found people who said, I can go around that proxy server. All they did was figure out how to get through this stuff and everything else because it is the user experience.
Yeah.
And they're on a device that they say, I need to get my work done. And we've actually had conversations here where it's, I actually couldn't get to sites to do my work because you think about 2010, 2011, people weren't allowed to go to mobile sites because if it had mobile in the name, you must be playing a game, you must be going to Facebook, everything else. And then you're asking, why would I put antivirus on a phone? And you all do some great things up there. I think there's need for anti-malware and everything else, but how do you give that transparency that we talked about yesterday without getting in the way of the users? And it's really for all 4 of you up there.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, before I give it to them, Brian, we talked about it a little bit, especially at the end, over on the end, you talked about it, Ranjeet, about user education, and that it needs to happen, and there's got to be a way to do that. I think, user education, which is why I bring up that OSI stack, it isn't the technology, it's user education and a carrot approach, but I digress. Let's bring it to the experts instead of me. Go ahead, Bharath.
So from my point of view, I think, Brian, you raise an excellent point around how do you balance the needs of the organization with the demands of the user, especially when mobile apps, consumer mobile apps have conditioned us all to expect this kind of tap and go seamless connectivity. And so I come back down to the point of shrink down that which creates impedance to the UX down to the app itself. So everything else that the user wants to do, it's their device, they control it, they manage it, all that kind of stuff. And then the part that you do need to control and manage and secure, try to make it as seamless as you can, but it's going to be a balancing act.
I think from our perspective, we look at it, our philosophy is actually to have as minimal an impact on the resources on the device as well as the user experience on the device. So a lot of this is accomplished. We kind of assume a connected device for the most part, mostly connected devices. Yeah, even airplanes these days have connectivity. So it's a delicate balance about what you do on the endpoint versus what you do in the cloud, right? When we talk about the cloud has a lot more visibility into the applications, firmware systems, or operating systems. So if you make a lot of the decision making there, essentially the experience on the device can be made more and more transparent. I agree. There are certain scenarios where there is going to be if you detect some kind of a nefarious activity on the device, you're going to block users from doing that. But you can bring that down to a bare minimal. And we've also found that from an IT perspective and user perspective, there is a lot of encouragement and people are embracing self-remediation rather than detecting a virus and having that go through the IT guy, filing a support ticket, and then calling you and then walking you through that. They actually having mechanisms by which you, in a friendly way, notify the user, hey, this is happening on your device. Would you like to take corrective action in this?
Yeah, but they have to know that exists. It's almost like a map. When you get the phone, it's like, follow these 4 things. If you encounter this, do this.
Or it's contextual. So when we detect something, there is a nice wizard or a pop-up that says, hey, please do this, get off this network, connect to this, or uninstall this app. So with that balance, actually, users actually like that interruption because they have now been guided to the right path. So I see the point, but I think from our perspective, it is a balance between doing stuff in the cloud versus doing stuff in the internet.
And IT likes it because it's less costly, right? I mean,
OpEx goes down significantly.
The previous panelists, we talked about, the cost of support, right?
Yeah.
The cost of support goes up the more support calls you get. If you can self-remediate and self-service some of those, the cost is going to go down.
Exactly.
I think you gave a perfect answer. I just want to add one more thing to that.
Please.
For decades, we allowed BYOD, but then stuck this agent down there with a container, or which basically we took some real estate on private device and forced him to put PIN and all that. Don't jailbreak your device, all that stuff. So it was, it was annoying, right? And I think that with the new technologies that are out there, you can, IT can tell the user, look, you use your own private device. Yes, there are 3-4 applications that we really care about, but the threat detection or prevention will protect your entire device. Because when a hacker comes in, He goes to your address book, right? You'll find him some corporate data, but also your private data, right? So you want to be protected as well as that. So I think that the new technologies allowed a slightly different dialogue where the corporate can show the BYO user, we also care about your assets on the device. We can protect them as well. It's not only that we care about our stuff.
Yeah, makes sense, Sheldon.
This time it didn't work out because he stole my answer. So, no, I'm just, honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head there. When we go out and we talk to people who are implementing a BYOD policy now, a couple things that we talk to them about is you want it to be as non-intrusive as possible. Here's my marketing spiel. You got to have a low rate of false positive. So it can't be popping up all the time on the screen every time you download a new application. So you got to have a low rate of false positive. I think the technologies up here that we're representing today all have come a long way from 2011, 2012 when you guys were talking about some of the intrusive stuff that was on the devices. You're always blocking down passwords, clunky. There's VPNs that don't necessarily work.
So Brian's still using that technology.
He may be, and we should talk then. But it has come a long way, and I think the last point about the end user, I use this in the sales pitch all the time. When you're rolling out a BYOD policy, and you, typically if you say, oh, we're going to roll out MDM, and we're going to put a password on your device and all this kind of stuff, they go, no, thank you. I don't want to access the network if I got to go through all this process. But if you can sit there and say, hey, we just want to make sure we're protected from a corporate perspective, so that we know that there's no vulnerabilities getting back into our corporate side of things. But at the same time, when you go into Starbucks and you connect to a network and you plan on doing your mobile banking, your Bank of America app, you're not going to shoot yourself in the foot as well.
Right.
So you're protecting against themselves.
So showing
as well.
them the benefits
Exactly.
of doing it, not just the, oh my God, what can happen, the horrors of what can happen.
Exactly.
But to your point, it's the benefits of what can happen.
Precisely. And I think it's come a long way in that over the last few years.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Was a hand up in the middle over here somewhere? Two of them, George and somebody else over here. Thank you, Paul.
So we've heard a lot about awareness, but I haven't heard much about how to raise awareness effectively. Can any of you cite any specific examples for any companies that you work with and how they have effectively raised or heightened user awareness so that it does become a second line of defense?
I mean, I'll start. I'll give you one. Thank you, George. Excellent question. So, at SAP, I ran mobile product marketing at SAP before starting my own business last year. And SAP, every 6 months, would have all the major mobile operators come in for Mobile Day. That Mobile Day would be, hey, are you getting the proper SAP discount on your service? Hey, let's look at your operating system, make sure it's updated. IT would partner with them. Hey, let's make sure you've got the latest application, latest technology, and oh, by the way, they'll give you a gift card or they'll make sure you've got the right discount. So again, like I talked about with Sheldon, every 6 months, people, when they'd go to lunch, there was a table, George, set out outside the lunchroom, all the cafeterias, people would pass by and all the operators would be there. Or they'd have one operator per day, like, Monday is AT&T, Tuesday is Sprint, Wednesday is Verizon. They'd have all the operators come in and they'd catch a really good percentage of the people and help them update, get the benefits they want, and also save a little money on their own because SAP didn't pay for all the service on the device. So there's a definite benefit there.
Yeah. I would say, and I think I speak for everyone up here, try it and share the results. So I think what we've been successful, when we've had successful deployments with one company in particular, they rolled it out, they did a pretty substantial proof of concept, they put it on a bunch of devices, and they found that their entire environment was a mess. They found so many vulnerabilities, so many side-loaded profiles and applications on the devices, and then what they did was they shared that data with the user community. So they went out there and said, when we did this, we didn't know what we were going to catch, we didn't know what we were going to find, if anything, and when we did roll it out, we found holes everywhere. We had multiple users that had vulnerabilities that probably already gave up access to the network. So when they shared that with the user community, it really increased awareness as to what they should be looking for, and by the way, why you need the solution on your phone. So I think you try it, try the new technologies that are out there and share the results with the end user community, and you've got a better success rate that they're going to get that awareness.
Just for your example, prior to joining the vendor space, the last company that I worked at was a manufacturing company. And their IT security program was nearly non-existent. The first thing I did when I get in there is start taking over and starting grassroots IT security notifications and user group engagements. So we started publishing different background screens that would scroll. We put flyers in the restroom. It's a captive audience, after all. And we started hosting different talks in each of the different buildings. And we went over really simple, basic end-user security program things like how to set the Facebook security, how to download the best apps on iOS or Android, how to make sure that you have access to see your teenagers' activity on their cell phones. Bringing that IT awareness, security awareness, and making it really relevant for the people that work there brought all the different programs and solutions and policies and procedures that we were implementing from an enterprise perspective right home, and they were seeing a much bigger benefit to themselves. And we even hosted a whole week-long program about identity theft. What to look for and what to do and how to report it, because we actually had 2 employees who were victims of identity theft within the same week. So yeah, definitely education, but take the tools and the processes and procedures that you're putting in the enterprise and figure out how to make that relevant and translate it into how they use the technology when they go home, and they're much more comfortable being security-minded when they access the corporate infrastructure.
Awesome. I got one more question, sorry. Go ahead, Ozzy, and Phil's going to pass the mic around.
The one comment that I wanted to say to those 2 stories, that basically there's no one way to do it. And the biggest problem corporate faces is that they don't have data. You know, they could do what you just did only after installing this stuff. Same stuff here. So there is a process where you have to install some stuff, collect information, understand the behavior, and then start putting the right awareness program.
Right.
That could be different for different groups in the
Oh, yeah,
organization.
definitely be different, definitely. Phil, do we have time for one more question, or are we done?
Yes, no, one more.
I think we had a question over here up front.
Sorry.
Make him run.
Yeah, faster.
Comfortable shoes for running.
Yes, my name is Pierre Bois. I am a cyber security researcher with Raytheon. Question is, we know that it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if we will be breached, but it's a matter of when. So the issue is, what can you tell us, every firm here, had to be proactive before that breach happens?
It's a really good question. I mean, obviously, a number of the technologies here on stage can help you from a proactive standpoint. I will say one of the customers I'm working with now has invoked a technology called deception technology, and they set up basically hybrid on-demand deception networks, because they know, no offense to Checkpoint or anybody else here, that all the endpoint security and all the defense and depth security, they're never 100% successful. Stuff always gets through onto endpoints and in the network, and using deception technology, you can actually put this ghost network up like a modern day honeypot, and it only appears to malicious traffic, and that is captured and forensically fed back to IT so they know what's happening before it starts manifesting itself. So that's one idea. I'm sure my panelists have others. Please.
I have an example I can talk about. This was related to a particular Android application. So essentially, in the 100,000 apps that we analyze every day, we found this one application, and we typically have a known bad, a known good database, right, from past analysis. And we found that in our analysis, we found that this particular application had been approved by Google, so it's on the Play Store, but it had been signed by someone who had written malware in the past, was talking to certain insecure IP addresses, and had 2 code blocks that actually mapped with some other malware. So completely 3 different data points, but at this point in time, this application was innocuous, but our systems flagged it as potential malware, and actually we went ahead and talked to Google, and said, hey, you guys should potentially consider bringing this application down. But Google, of course, they have policies and they can't just randomly bring it out. They said, well, we understand your philosophy, but we can't do it right now. But then lo and behold, 2 weeks later, there was a JavaScript-based update pushed to that application, and suddenly on 5 million user devices, this application starts misbehaving. At that point in time, in about less than 24 hours, Google pulls down this, right? So to your point, predictive analytics has certainly gotten better. Is it 100% foolproof? Not there, but I think the collective intelligence of this group will push us in that direction.
So we have time for one more comment from a panelist, but I think we're out of time. Any other comments you want to add and close?
You're the last one, so
Sure.
you didn't have a comment, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I think in a nutshell, what we've all been talking about is a mix of reactive and proactive stuff. So, as you said, it's not a matter of if, but when. And so do everything you can to protect yourself from when happening as infrequently as possible. And then be prepared to deal with the when it happens.
Great. With that, I'll wrap it here. Phil.